always believed family was sacred. Blood meant loyalty, protection, and unconditional love. That was until my own blood betrayed me, stole everything I had worked for, and left me with nothing but the bitter taste of deception. My name is Janet, and this is the story of how I discovered the dark secrets festering beneath my family's perfect facade, and how karma finally balanced the scales. Growing up in the small coastal town of Milford Bay, our family name, Harrington, carried weight. My grandfather had built a shipping empire from nothing, and my father expanded it into a business conglomerate worth millions. As the eldest daughter, I was groomed from childhood to eventually take over, working twice as hard as anyone else to prove myself worthy despite being a woman in an old-fashioned family. Business is not for women, Janet, my father would say, even as I graduated top of my class with a business degree and brought innovative ideas that increased our company's profits by 30% in my first year. But I persevered. By 35, I had become the de facto heir, the unofficial CEO who ran daily operations, while my aging father remained the figurehead. My younger brother Marcus seemed content with his position managing our West Coast office. He had always been more interested in enjoying the family wealth than earning it. At least, that was what I thought. The beginning of my downfall came on a rainy Tuesday evening. I was working late at the office, finalizing a major acquisition that would secure our company's future for generations. My phone rang. My father's private nurse. "Janet, you need to come to the house immediately. Your father has had another stroke." I arrived at our family estate to find ambulance lights reflecting off rain-slicked pavement. Inside, paramedics were loading my father onto a stretcher. His face was slack on one side, his speech slurred, but his eyes found mine with desperation. "Janet," he managed to whisper when I approached. "The safe papers, be careful." Before I could ask what he meant, the paramedics whisked him away. My mother, tearful but composed as always, touched my arm. "He will be fine," she assured me. "Go home and rest. I will call if anything changes." But I could not shake my father's warning. After everyone left, I went to his study and opened the hidden wall safe behind his portrait, a safe only he and I knew the combination to. Inside was the usual: property deeds, insurance policies, his will. But something was wrong. The folder containing our company's ownership documents was thinner than it should have been. I spent the entire night reviewing the papers, and by morning, my blood ran cold. Several documents had been replaced with forgeries. The changes were subtle but devastating. Ownership percentages had been altered, new clauses inserted, and most alarmingly, my brother's signature had been backdated on transfers I had never seen before. My phone rang again. It was my mother. "Janet, your father. He did not make it through the night." Grief crashed into me, but alongside it came a horrible realization. The timing was too perfect. My father's warning, the altered documents, his sudden death. The next few days passed in a blur of funeral arrangements and condolences. Marcus flew back immediately, his grief appearing genuine as he embraced me at the airport. "We will get through this together, Jan," he said, using my childhood nickname, his eyes red-rimmed. "Dad would want us to stay strong." I almost believed him until the reading of the will 3 days later. Our family lawyer, Gerald Thompson, who had been with us for over 30 years, looked uncomfortable as he prepared to read the document. "This last will and testament was updated 6 months ago," he began, not meeting my eyes. What followed was nothing short of a corporate coup. According to the will, my father had decided to split the company ownership, giving Marcus 51% controlling interest, while I received only 25%. The remaining shares were distributed among board members loyal to Marcus. "This cannot be right," I said, my voice hoarse with shock. "Dad always intended for me to take over." Marcus placed a sympathetic hand on my shoulder. "Dad changed his mind January. He was worried about your health. Said you were working yourself to death. He wanted to protect you." "My health?" I stared at him incredulously. "I have never been sick a day in my life." Gerald cleared his throat. "There are medical reports. Your father consulted specialists about your condition." "What condition?" I demanded. "The early onset dementia," Marcus said softly. "Dad did not want to burden you with the knowledge." The room seemed to tilt beneath me. This was not just a betrayal. It was an elaborate frame job. I had no history of memory problems, no dementia symptoms. These medical reports had to be forgeries, just like the company documents. This is absurd, I said. I demand a full investigation. But my protests fell on deaf ears. Within a week, Marcus had called an emergency board meeting and voted me out of my position. Security escorted me from the building I had practically lived in for 15 years, carrying a single box of personal belongings. Outside in the parking lot, my mother waited by her car. "You need to accept this, Janet," she said without preamble. "Your father knew what he was doing." I searched her face, the face of the woman who had raised me, who had bandaged my scraped knees and celebrated my achievements. Now she looked at me like a stranger. "You knew," I whispered, the final piece clicking into place. "You were part of this." She did not deny it. "Marcus is a man. This company was always meant for a man to lead. Your father indulged your ambitions for too long." The betrayal cut so deep I could hardly breathe. "Dad would never have agreed to this." "Your father was weak where you were concerned," she replied coldly. "He could not see that you were destroying yourself with work. This is for your own good." I laughed bitterly. "And the dementia diagnosis? Was that for my own good too?" She had the decency to look away. "That was Marcus's idea. I did not approve, but what is done is done." "What did they offer you?" I asked. "What was your price for betraying your own daughter?" "The foundation," she answered without hesitation. "Marcus promised me complete control over the Harrington Foundation and its $100 million endowment." At least she was honest about her betrayal. I turned away, unable to look at her any longer. "I will never forgive this," I said quietly. "You will in time," she replied. "Family forgives." I said nothing as I walked to my car. She did not know me as well as she thought. Family might forgive, but I was no longer sure I had a family. That night, alone in my apartment, I allowed myself one evening of grief and rage. I screamed until my voice gave out, broke a vase against the wall, and finished a bottle of scotch my father had given me when I closed my first major deal. Then, as the first light of dawn crept through my blinds, I made a decision. They had taken everything from me, but they had forgotten one crucial detail. I had built the modern Harrington empire with my own hands. I knew its strengths, its weaknesses, and all its secrets. And I would use that knowledge to take back what was mine, and ensure karma found its way to everyone involved. My first step was securing my own survival. I had always maintained a personal emergency fund separate from family accounts, a lesson my grandfather had taught me. With those resources, I rented a modest house under an assumed name in a neighboring town and established a home office. Next, I needed allies. Despite my family's betrayal, I had built solid relationships throughout the business world. One of these was with Sophia Chun, a brilliant attorney who had once worked for our company before starting her own practice. "They did what?" Sophia exclaimed when I explained my situation over coffee at her office. "That cannot be legal, Janet." "It might not be, but they have covered their tracks well," I replied. "The forged documents look impeccable, and they have manufactured medical evidence against me." Sophia's eyes narrowed. "Medical evidence can be disputed, and document forgery leaves traces if you know where to look." "I need time and resources to fight this," I said. "Right now I have limited funds and no position of power." "What you need," Sophia said thoughtfully, "is leverage. Something that makes them vulnerable while you build your case." She was right, and I knew exactly where to start. Gerald Thompson, our family lawyer, had always been uncomfortable with ethical gray areas. If Marcus and my mother had involved him in document forgery, he would have left a paper trail, if only to protect himself. I needed to find that trail. Through Sophia's connections, I hired a private investigator named Ray Morales, a former fraud detective with the police department. His job was to watch Gerald and find a way to access his private files. Meanwhile, I established contact with Diana Lewis, my father's former assistant. She had been let go immediately after his death, another red flag I had missed in my grief. I knew something was wrong. Diana told me when we met at a quiet diner outside town. "Your father was acting strangely in the weeks before his stroke. He kept checking the safe, reviewing documents. And Marcus was visiting much more frequently than usual. Did my father ever mention being concerned about me? About my health? I asked. Diana looked puzzled. Never. In fact, the day before his stroke, he was talking about formalizing your position as CEO. He had the papers drawn up. My heart ached at this confirmation. Did he sign them? Yes, she said. I witnessed it myself. He put them in the safe. Papers that had conveniently disappeared. But if Diana had witnessed them, that was already something. There's something else, Diana added, lowering her voice. The nurse, Elaine, she quit right after your father died. Said she could not live with herself. I tried calling her, but her number's disconnected. Another thread to pull. If the nurse had quit suddenly, she might know something about my father's death that did not align with the official story. Over the next 3 months, I built my case piece by piece. Ray discovered that Gerald had been visiting a storage facility regularly. Unusual for a man of his position, who had an office with secure file storage. When Ray managed to access the unit, he found copies of the original documents, the ones showing my rightful place in the company, alongside copies of the forgeries. Gerald had kept evidence as insurance. Typical lawyer behavior, protecting himself in case the scheme fell apart. Finding Elaine proved more challenging, but persistence paid off. She had moved to her sister's house in Oregon, clearly running from something. When I finally spoke with her on the phone, she broke down. I cannot talk about this, she sobbed. They will ruin me. Who? I pressed. My brother? My mother? All of them, she whispered. They changed your father's medication the night he had the stroke. Said it was a new prescription, but it was not what the doctor had ordered. I knew something was wrong when he started having symptoms, but by then it was too late. My blood ran cold. This was not just fraud. It was potentially murder. Elaine, I said carefully, would you be willing to make a statement? With protection, of course. There was a long pause. Will it bring them down? All of them? Yes, I promised. Every last one. While building my legal case, I also worked on understanding the company's current operations. Through industry contacts, I learned that Marcus was running the business into the ground. He had fired experienced managers and replaced them with friends, approved risky investments, and was bleeding cash on vanity projects. The company's stock had dropped 30% in 3 months. I also discovered that my mother's precious foundation was being used as a personal slush fund. Instead of supporting the causes my father had cared about, money was being funneled to fake charities, and then back to Marcus and my mother's private accounts. It was time to set my plan in motion. With Sophia's help, I compiled all the evidence. The original documents from Gerald's storage unit, affidavits from Diana and Elaine, financial records showing the foundation fraud, and medical experts willing to testify that I showed no signs of cognitive impairment. But before going to the authorities, I had one more card to play. Through a series of shell companies, I had been quietly buying Harrington stock as it plummeted. With each of Marcus's failures, I increased my position. By leveraging my savings and securing backing from investors who knew my track record, I had accumulated a significant stake in the company. Not enough for control, but enough to cause problems. I arranged to meet Marcus at his favorite restaurant, an overpriced steakhouse where he entertained clients and mistresses alike. He looked surprised when I slid into the seat across from him, but quickly recovered, offering a practiced smile. Janet, this is unexpected. How have you been? Busy, I replied simply. Learning interesting things about our family. His smile faltered slightly. Oh, like what? Like how our father's medication was tampered with the night of his stroke. Like how the foundation is being used as your personal piggy bank. Like how Gerald Thompson kept copies of all the documents you forged. I maintained eye contact as I spoke, watching fear creep into his expression. Those are serious allegations, he said, his voice strained, and completely unfounded. I slid a folder across the table. Everything is in here. Copies, of course. The originals are with my attorney, along with instructions to take them to the authorities if anything happens to me. He did not touch the folder. What do you want? Originally, justice. For you, mother, and everyone involved to face consequences for what you did to father and to me. I leaned forward. But I am willing to consider alternatives. Money? He asked, a hint of relief in his voice. He had always believed everyone could be bought. Control, I corrected him. I want my position back. I want 51% of the company shares transferred to me, legally and permanently. I want the board restructured and the foundation audited. He laughed, though it sounded hollow. And why would I agree to that? Because your alternative is prison, I said calmly. The medication tampering alone could be considered attempted murder. The fraud charges would ensure you never work in business again. And once this becomes public, the company will collapse completely. You would destroy the family legacy out of spite, he hissed. You did that when you betrayed me, I countered. I am offering you a chance to salvage something. You can keep a minority share. You can even keep your job at the West Coast office. You were good at that, at least. But the control returns to me. And mother. She resigns from the foundation. All misappropriated funds must be returned. But she keeps her reputation, publicly at least. Marcus stared at me for a long moment, calculation clear in his eyes. Finally, he reached for the folder and flipped through its contents, his face paling as he recognized the damning evidence. You always were the smart one, he said quietly. Yes, I agreed. I was. The next 2 weeks were a whirlwind of legal maneuvers. Sophia orchestrated everything. The transfer of shares, the new company structure, the confidential settlements with Gerald, and the board members who had been complicit. My mother, when confronted with the evidence, signed away her foundation position without argument, though the coldness in her eyes told me our relationship was irreparably damaged. Marcus fought longer, trying to find loopholes, but ultimately capitulated when I leaked information about the company's financial mismanagement to key investors, causing the stock to plummet further. With his personal wealth tied to the company's performance, he could not afford to watch it collapse completely. On a rainy Monday morning, almost exactly 1 year after my father's death, I walked back into Harrington headquarters as CEO. The security guards who had escorted me out now nodded respectfully. Employees who had avoided eye contact during my ouster now smiled nervously. My father's old office had been redecorated by Marcus in gaudy gold and black, a testament to his inflated ego. I had everything removed except for one item, a small painting of Milford Bay that my father had loved. It would serve as a reminder of why I had fought so hard to return. The first board meeting under my leadership was tense but productive. I presented a comprehensive recovery plan that would stabilize the company within 6 months. The new board members, experienced professionals I had personally selected, asked thoughtful questions and offered valuable insights. Marcus attended by video conference, his participation minimal. My mother did not attend at all. As the meeting concluded, one of the new board members, a respected industry veteran named Helen Winters, approached me. I knew your father for 20 years, she said. He would be proud of how you handled this. I was not so sure. My father had valued family loyalty above all else, and I had exposed our dirty laundry, albeit selectively and strategically. But I had also saved his life's work from ruin. Thank you, I replied simply. In the months that followed, I rebuilt the Harrington empire stronger than before. The company's stock recovered as investor confidence returned. I rehired key personnel who had been pushed out during Marcus's tenure, and implemented the modernization plans I had been developing for years. The foundation was restructured with an independent board and strict oversight mechanisms. Its focus returned to my father's original vision, supporting education and healthcare initiatives in communities where our company operated. Marcus kept his word and his position, though he rarely spoke to me outside of necessary business communications. My mother moved to our family's summer home in Florida, creating as much distance as possible between us. As for me, I learned painful but valuable lessons about trust, power, and justice. I discovered that family is not defined by blood, but by loyalty and shared values. The allies who had stood by me during my darkest days, Sophia, Ray, Diana, and others, had become my true family. On the anniversary of my return to the company, I visited my father's grave alone. The marble headstone gleamed in the morning sunlight, as I placed a single white rose beside it. I did what I had to do, I told him. I hope you understand. A gentle breeze rustled the cemetery trees, and for a moment, I felt a sense of peace I had not experienced since before his death. Whether it was forgiveness or simply acceptance, I could not say. But it was enough. Karma had finally balanced the scales. The legacy my grandfather and father had built would continue, stronger and more ethical than before. And I had learned that true revenge was not about destruction but about restoration. Taking back what was rightfully mine and building it into something better. As I walked back to my car, my phone rang with a call from the office. There was work to be done, a company to lead, and a future to secure. The past had taught me its harsh lessons, but I would not, let it define me. I was Janet Harrington, and I had survived betrayal, loss, and deceit. Now it was time to thrive. When people ask me how I managed to regain control of a multimillion-dollar company after being completely ousted, I usually give them the sanitized version. Determination, strategic thinking, and a little bit of luck. The truth, the dark, messy reality of family betrayal and carefully orchestrated revenge, is something I keep close to my chest. After all, some stories are better left untold, especially when the main characters still sit across from you at occasional holiday dinners, smiling thinly over glasses of expensive wine. The restoration of the Harrington legacy was only the beginning. The harder work came in the years that followed, rebuilding not just a company, but my own sense of identity and purpose. The first challenge emerged 6 months after my return as CEO. A routine audit of our international operations revealed that Marcus had established a network of offshore accounts during his brief tenure. Millions had been siphoned from company coffers and distributed among shell companies with obscure ownership structures. I called him personally when I discovered this. I thought we had an agreement, I said, my voice carefully controlled. We did, he replied smoothly. I returned control to you. What happened before that was not covered in our arrangement. You stole from the company, I stated flatly. I made strategic investments, he countered. The money was not stolen, merely relocated. Return it, I demanded. All of it, by the end of the week, or our previous agreement is void. There was a pause. You would not dare expose everything now. The company has just started to recover. The scandal would devastate the stock price. He was right, but he had miscalculated one crucial factor. I was no longer the same person who had negotiated our original deal. That woman had been desperate to regain what was hers. This woman, the one who had fought her way back to power, would not be threatened or manipulated again. Marcus, I said quietly, I rebuilt this company from the ashes you left it in. I can do it again if necessary. Can you say the same about your reputation? Your freedom? Think carefully about your next move. 3 days later, the money was returned. Marcus resigned from his position at the West Coast office the following week, citing personal reasons and a desire to explore new opportunities. Our communication ceased entirely after that. My mother presented a different kind of challenge. Unlike Marcus, whose motivation had always been simple greed, her betrayal stemmed from deeply ingrained beliefs about gender and family hierarchy. In her world, women supported men's ambitions. They did not harbor ambitions of their own. 6 months after moving to Florida, she returned for a charity gala our company was sponsoring. I had not invited her, but as the former head of the foundation, she still maintained connections with board members who had. She approached me during the cocktail hour, elegant as always in midnight blue silk, her silver hair perfectly styled. The company seems to be doing well, she observed, as if commenting on the weather. Yes, I replied. We have exceeded pre-crisis levels in most divisions. An awkward silence stretched between us until she sighed heavily. Janet, this estrangement is unnecessary. We are family. I met her gaze steadily. Family does not conspire to declare family members mentally incompetent. Family does not steal inheritances. Family does not possibly contribute to a father's death. She flinched at the last accusation. I never wanted your father harmed. That was not part of the plan. It was the closest thing to an admission of guilt I had ever heard from her. What was the plan, Mother? To push me out quietly? To erase decades of my work? Because I had the audacity to be successful in a man's world? We wanted to protect you, she insisted, though her voice lacked conviction. The business was consuming you. You never married, never had children. Your father worried about you. So you invented a dementia diagnosis? I laughed bitterly. Such protection. That was Marcus's idea, she said quickly. I told him it was unnecessary, but he insisted we needed something irrefutable. And you went along with it, I noted. Just like you went along with the medication change that could have killed father. Her face paled. I did not know about that until afterward. You must believe me, Janet. Perhaps she was telling the truth about that particular detail. Perhaps she had drawn a line at murder, if not at fraud. But it changed nothing between us. I believe you have lost the right to my trust, I said calmly. Enjoy the gala, mother. The foundation you once controlled is doing remarkable work now. Work that would have made father proud. I walked away then, ignoring the tears in her eyes. They might have been genuine, but so was the damage she had done. Over the next 2 years, I rebuilt my personal life with the same methodical care I applied to business. I reconnected with old friends who had been pushed aside during my workaholic years. I developed new interests, sailing, painting, voluntary teaching at a local business school. I even began dating occasionally, though I approached relationships with newfound caution. The company flourished under my leadership. We expanded internationally, acquired complementary businesses, and developed a reputation for ethical practices that attracted top talent. The Harrington name became associated with innovation and integrity, rather than the cutthroat tactics of the past. I established a scholarship program in my father's name, providing educational opportunities for women pursuing business careers. Each year, I personally mentored several recipients, sharing lessons about both business strategy and personal resilience. 3 years after my return to power, Gerald Thompson, our former family lawyer, who had been quietly practicing in a neighboring state since the scandal, contacted me through Sophia. He is dying, Sophia explained during a lunch meeting. Pancreatic cancer. Stage 4. He wants to talk to you before he goes. Why? I asked. We have nothing to say to each other. He claims there are things you should know, she replied, sliding a business card with an address across the table. Things about your father's death. Despite my reservations, I drove to the hospice facility the following weekend. Gerald was barely recognizable. The distinguished attorney reduced to a skeletal figure in a hospital bed. His eyes, however, remained sharp and alert. Thank you for coming, he said, his voice raspy from disuse. Sophia said you had information about my father, I replied, taking a seat beside his bed. He nodded weakly. The stroke was not an accident, as you suspected. But it was not just the medication change that caused it. What are you saying? Your father discovered what Marcus and your mother were planning, he explained. He confronted them the day before the stroke. There was a heated argument. I was present as legal counsel. Your father threatened to cut them both off completely, to change his will, leaving everything to you. My heart tightened. So they decided to silence him. Marcus suggested adding something to his medication, just enough to trigger a minor episode that would raise questions about your father's competence. If he was deemed unable to manage his affairs, the existing will would stand, and their plan could proceed. Gerald's breathing grew labored. It was never supposed to be fatal, but your father had developed a sensitivity to the compound they used. Instead of a minor episode, they killed him. I finished, my voice hollow. Unintentionally, Gerald qualified, though it made little difference. Your mother was horrified when she realized what had happened. Marcus convinced her it was too late to turn back. And you went along with it all, I said. Facilitated fraud, covered up manslaughter. Gerald closed his eyes briefly. I have no excuse. I had represented your family for 30 years. Your father was my friend. But Marcus had leverage over me. Financial improprieties from years ago that would have ended my career, and possibly sent me to prison. So you chose self-preservation. Yes, he admitted. To my eternal shame. That is why I kept copies of everything. Some small attempt at atonement. I stood, unable to remain in his presence any longer. Is there anything else I should know? Just one thing, he said. Your father left you a personal letter. It was in the safe with the other documents. Marcus must have taken it when he removed the original will. Another piece of my father stolen from me. Do you know what it said? Gerald shook his head. No. But knowing your father, I imagine it contained the wisdom and love he always had for you. I left the hospice without saying goodbye. Gerald died 3 weeks later, his secrets dying with him. Except for those he had shared with me. I considered using this new information to pursue criminal charges against Marcus and my mother. The statute of limitations had not expired, and Gerald's deathbed confession would carry weight. But ultimately I decided against it. Not out of forgiveness. I had not reached that point and doubted I ever would. Rather, it was the recognition that continuing to fight old battles would only keep me tethered to the past. My father was gone. No punishment inflicted on those responsible would bring him back or heal the wound of his loss. Instead, I channeled my energy into living the life he would have wanted for me. One of purpose, achievement, and eventually happiness. I established a corporate governance structure that would prevent the kind of coup that had ousted me. I diversified my personal holdings to ensure I could never again be left financially vulnerable. And most importantly, I built a circle of trusted friends and colleagues who valued me for who I was, not for the power or wealth I represented. 5 years after regaining control of Harrington Enterprises, I received an unexpected package at my office. The return address was from a law firm I did not recognize in Miami, Florida. Inside was a sealed envelope yellowed with age, and a brief note. Janet, *, I found this among your mother's papers following her passing last month. She instructed it be sent to you unopened. I believe it is what Gerald Thompson mentioned to you years ago. *, with condolences, Richard Brennan Esq. My mother had died without my knowledge. We had not spoken in years, though I occasionally received formal Christmas and birthday cards with her perfect penmanship and no personal message. I felt a complex wave of emotions. Grief for the relationship we might have had, anger at the one we did have, and a strange, hollow relief that our painful estrangement had reached its natural conclusion. With trembling fingers, I opened the sealed envelope. Inside was a letter in my father's distinctive handwriting, dated 2 days before his stroke. My dearest Janet, *, if you are reading this, something has gone terribly wrong. I have learned of a plot against you, against us both, orchestrated by those we should have been able to trust most. I have confronted them and made my position clear, but I fear they will not accept my decision easily. *, I want you to know that you have always been my greatest pride, not just for your business acumen, which is exceptional, but for your integrity, your determination, and your compassion. Qualities that will serve you well in the dark days that may lie ahead if my worst fears are realized. *, I have made arrangements to protect your inheritance and position, but if you are reading this letter, those arrangements have been compromised. Know this. Whatever documents may exist, whatever claims may be made against you, my true wish has always been for you to lead our family's legacy into the future. *. Trust Sophia Chen. She knows parts of my contingency plan. Trust your own instincts. And remember that true strength comes not just from winning battles, but from choosing which ones are worth fighting. *. All my love. Dad. *P.S. Check the painting of Milford Bay in my office, the one you gave me for my 60th birthday. Its value goes far beyond sentimentalism. *. Tears streamed down my face as I read and reread the letter. My father had known. He had tried to protect me, and somewhere in his final message was a clue he had hoped would reach me. The painting of Milford Bay, the only item I had kept from my father's office when I reclaimed the company. It had hung on my wall for 5 years, a daily reminder of him and the coastal town where our family story began. That evening, I carefully removed the painting from the wall and examined it closely. The frame was solid wood, hand-carved, nothing unusual there. The canvas itself seemed ordinary, the brushstrokes capturing the familiar harbor with its bobbing fishing boats and distant lighthouse. But when I turned it over, I noticed the backing paper had been professionally replaced at some point. Carefully, I peeled it away to reveal a slim compartment built into the frame. Inside was a USB drive, and a small key with a bank logo engraved on it. The USB drive contained copies of all the original company documents, the ones proving my rightful position, along with recordings of conversations between my father and Gerald Thompson, discussing his succession plans. The most damning was a video my father had secretly recorded of Marcus proposing the scheme to remove me from power, complete with references to the fabricated medical reports. The key opened a safe deposit box containing irrefutable evidence of my mother and brother's plan, evidence my father had gathered when he first suspected their betrayal. It would have been enough to send them both to prison had I discovered it earlier. But I had already won without it. I had reclaimed my company, restored my reputation, and rebuilt my life. This final vindication from beyond the grave was not a call to renewed battle, but my father's last gift. Confirmation that I had been right all along, that his faith in me had never wavered. I returned the USB drive and key to their hiding place in the painting frame. Perhaps someday they would be needed, but for now they were simply insurance, a safeguard against any future attempts to rewrite history. 2 months later, I received a letter from Marcus. He had moved to Europe after leaving the company, and had apparently built a new life there. His letter was not quite an apology, but an acknowledgement of sorts. Janet, I have heard about Mother's passing. Whatever lies between us, I thought you should know that in her final days, she expressed regret about how things unfolded. She kept your achievements in business clipped from international papers. I believe she was, in her own way, proud of you in the end, For my part, I have come to recognize that my actions were driven by insecurity and greed. Watching from afar, as you rebuilt what I nearly destroyed, has been a humbling experience. You were always the better businessperson, the better Harrington, I do not expect forgiveness, nor do I deserve it. But I wanted you to know that the legacy you have created exceeds even what Father envisioned. That is something I can acknowledge without reservation, Marcus. I did not reply. Some wounds run too deep for mere words to bridge. But I did frame an article from the Financial Times that had named me one of the most influential business leaders of the year, and sent it to the return address on his letter. No note, no message, just a simple acknowledgement that I had seen his words and recognized the small truth within them. 10 years after the betrayal that had nearly destroyed me, Harrington Enterprises celebrated its 75th anniversary. We held a gala event at company headquarters, with employees, partners, and clients from around the world in attendance. As I stood at the podium to deliver my speech, I looked out at the sea of faces, colleagues who had stood by me, new employees who knew me only as the successful CEO, industry partners who respected the company we had become. Among them were faces that had witnessed my fall and subsequent rise. People who knew at least parts of the true story behind the Harrington legacy. 75 years ago, I began. My grandfather started this company with a single ship and an unwavering belief that integrity was the most valuable commodity in business. Through the decades, Harrington Enterprises has weathered storms both literal and figurative, emerging stronger each time. I paused, my gaze sweeping across the ballroom. 10 years ago, we faced perhaps our greatest challenge, a period of uncertainty and change that tested the very foundation of this company. Many of you were here during that time. You saw how close we came to losing everything my grandfather and father had built. A murmur rippled through the audience. The dark period, as it had come to be known internally, was rarely discussed so openly. What saved us was not just strategic business decisions or financial maneuvering, though those played their part. What truly preserved the Harrington legacy was a return to those core values my grandfather established: integrity, resilience, and the courage to fight for what is right, no matter the personal cost. In the back of the room, I noticed Sophia Chen smiling knowingly. Beside her stood Diana Lewis, now our Chief Operating Officer, a position she had earned through loyalty and exceptional skill. Tonight, as we celebrate 75 years of success, I want to announce the establishment of the Harrington Ethics Institute, an independent organization dedicated to promoting corporate governance and business ethics. With an initial endowment of $50 million, the Institute will fund research, education, and advocacy aimed at preventing the kind of corporate malfeasance that nearly destroyed us a decade ago. The announcement drew enthusiastic applause. Few understood the personal satisfaction this particular initiative brought me, creating a permanent safeguard against the very tactics that had been used against me. Additionally, I continued once the applause subsided, we are launching the Edward Harrington Second Chance program, named after my father. This program will provide employment opportunities and mentorship for individuals who have been wrongfully displaced from their careers due to discrimination, corporate politics, or ethical whistleblowing. More applause, even more enthusiastic than before. This time, I noticed several executives dabbing at their eyes. They remembered my father, his fairness, his principled leadership, and recognized this as a fitting tribute. My father once told me that a company is not defined by its profits or its size, but by the impact it has on the lives it touches. As we move forward into our next 75 years, let us measure our success not just in financial terms, but in the positive difference we make in our communities, our industry, and the world. I raised my champagne glass to the Harrington legacy, past, present, and future. The crowd rose as one, raising their glasses in response to the Harrington legacy. Later that evening, as the celebration continued around me, I stepped out onto the balcony for a moment of quiet reflection. The city lights sparkled below, a testament to the vibrant community our company had helped build over 3/4 of a century. A voice spoke from behind me. Quite the speech. I turned to find Helen Winters, the board member who had told me years ago that my father would have been proud. Thank you, I replied. I meant every word. I know you did. She moved to stand beside me at the railing. Your father and I were friends for many years, you know. Not just business associates. He spoke highly of you, I acknowledged. He spoke even more highly of you, she said. Even before you joined the company, he saw something in you from the beginning. A strength he said reminded him of his own father. The comparison to my grandfather, a man of legendary determination, warmed something inside me. When everything happened, Helen continued carefully, after Edward's death, I was traveling abroad. By the time I returned, Marcus had already taken control. I knew something was wrong, but I could not prove anything. Many people felt that way, I said, but few were willing to say it aloud. Fear is a powerful silencer, she agreed, which is why what you accomplished is all the more remarkable. You did not just reclaim your position, you transformed the entire culture of the company. We stood in companionable silence for a moment, watching the city below. There is something I have wondered, Helen said finally. Something I have never had the courage to ask. What is that? How much did it cost you? Not financially but personally. To fight your way back, to face that kind of betrayal from your own family. There must have been a toll. It was a question no one had ever asked me directly. Most people saw only the triumph, the successful businesswoman who had overcome adversity. Few considered the personal cost of that journey. It changed me, I admitted, for better and worse. I learned to trust my instincts but question everyone's motives. I became more strategic, but perhaps less spontaneous. I value loyalty above almost all other qualities now. I took a sip of champagne before continuing. The hardest part was not the betrayal itself, but the realization that the family I thought I had never truly existed. My mother had always seen me as somehow less worthy because of my gender. My brother had always resented my abilities. My father. He loved me, but he failed to see the darkness growing within his own family until it was too late. And yet you rebuilt, Helen observed. Not just the company, but a life worth living. Yes, I agreed, surprising myself with the certainty in my voice. It took time to recognize that success could be the best revenge, but living well, truly well with purpose and integrity, that is the ultimate victory. Helen smiled, raising her glass slightly. To living well, then. To living well, I echoed, clinking my glass against hers. After the gala, I returned home to my penthouse apartment overlooking the bay. It was modern and elegant, but with personal touches that made it distinctly mine. Paintings by local artists, photographs from my travels, bookshelves filled with volumes ranging from business strategy to classical literature. On my bedside table, sat a framed photo of my father and me from my university graduation. He was beaming with pride, his arm around my shoulders as I clutched my business degree. It was one of the few personal items I had rescued during my ouster, and it had traveled with me from the modest rental house to this luxurious apartment as my fortunes changed. I picked it up, studying his face in the dim light. "We did it, Dad," I whispered. "We saved your legacy." Perhaps it was imagination, perhaps just the emotional weight of the anniversary celebration, but I could almost hear his reply. "No, Janet. You created your own." The next morning, I woke to news that sent shockwaves through the business world. Marcus had died in a boating accident off the coast of Monaco. Initial reports suggested mechanical failure had caused his yacht to explode, killing him and injuring several guests. The irony was not lost on me. The Harrington empire had begun with ships, and now Marcus had met his end on one. I felt a complex swirl of emotions: shock, a hollow sense of closure, and an unexpected pang of grief for the brother he might have been in another life. I issued an appropriate statement expressing sorrow for the loss and arranging for his remains to be returned to the family plot. I attended his funeral, a small, somber affair with few mourners, and placed a single white rose on his casket, mirroring my ritual at our father's grave. 2 weeks later, Marcus's lawyer contacted me regarding his will. To my surprise, my brother had left his minority share in Harrington Enterprises to me, along with a brief letter. "Janet, asterisk if you are reading this, fate has finally caught up with me. Perhaps it is fitting. I have spent my life taking shortcuts and seeking the easy path, only to find myself constantly looking over my shoulder. Asterisk. Asterisk I return to you what was always rightfully yours. The remaining shares of Harrington Enterprises now revert to your complete control. Use them wisely, as we both know you will. Asterisk. Asterisk in my final years, I have come to respect what you built from the ashes of my betrayal. It is a far greater company than I could have created, than even Father might have envisioned. That acknowledgement comes too late to matter, I know, but it is sincere nonetheless. Asterisk. Asterisk goodbye, sister. May you find peace in your victory. Asterisk. Marcus. With his death, I became the sole owner of Harrington Enterprises, the culmination of a journey that had begun with total loss. The company's stock rose on the news, investors expressing confidence in the consolidated leadership structure. Yet the victory felt hollow somehow, not because I mourned Marcus. Our relationship had been beyond repair long before his death, but because I realized that complete ownership had never been my true goal. What I had fought for was recognition, justice, the vindication of knowing that my father had been right to believe in me. All of that had been achieved years ago. This final consolidation of power was merely an epilogue to a story that had already reached its resolution. In the months that followed, I made another significant decision. I began the process of taking Harrington Enterprises public. Not out of any need for capital. The company was more profitable than ever, but to ensure its long-term survival beyond any single individual, even me. The IPO was structured to maintain strong corporate governance while distributing ownership among employees, institutional investors, and the public. I retained controlling interest, but established a foundation that would eventually inherit my shares upon my retirement or death, with strict provisions to protect the company's ethical framework and core values. "Are you sure about this?" Sophia asked when I first presented the plan. "After everything you went through to gain complete control?" "I am not giving up control," I clarified. "I am ensuring succession. My father's mistake was failing to create a structure that could withstand manipulation. I will not repeat that error." The public offering was a resounding success. Harrington Enterprises' stock price doubled within the first week of trading, and financial analysts praised the company's solid fundamentals and innovative governance structure. At 55, 20 years after the betrayal that had nearly destroyed me, I found myself at the helm of a larger, stronger, more ethically grounded organization than I could have imagined in my ambitious youth. The company employed thousands, operated in dozens of countries, and was consistently rated among the best places to work globally. More importantly, I had created something my father and grandfather would have been proud of. Not just a profitable business, but an institution built on integrity and resilience. My personal life had evolved as well. After years of cautious dating, I had formed a relationship with Thomas Reeves, a literature professor I met at a university fundraiser. He was thoughtful, kind, and blissfully uninterested in corporate politics. Our relationship developed slowly, built on mutual respect and genuine affection, rather than the power dynamics that had characterized so many of my previous romantic encounters. "What I love about you," Thomas told me one evening as we walked along the beach near my weekend home, "is that you have experienced the worst of human nature and still chosen kindness." I laughed softly. Many people would not describe me as kind. Formidable, perhaps. Determined. Sometimes ruthless. In business, maybe, he acknowledged. But I have seen how you mentor young executives, especially women facing the same barriers you encountered. I have watched you establish programs for disadvantaged communities. I have witnessed your generosity with both resources and spirit. His observations made me pause. I had been so focused on justice and restoration, for so long, that I had not fully recognized how those pursuits had transformed me. In fighting against betrayal, I had become more attuned to loyalty. In combating deception, I had developed a deeper appreciation for truth. In overcoming isolation, I had learned the value of genuine connection. Perhaps, I conceded, karma works in both directions. The negative actions of others set certain consequences in motion, but so do our responses to those actions. Thomas nodded. The ancient Greeks would have called it nemesis. Not just punishment for hubris, but restoration of proper balance. Balance. That was what I had ultimately achieved, though the journey had been far from straightforward. The scales of justice had finally settled into equilibrium. My position restored, my family's legacy secured, my personal peace reclaimed. On the 25th anniversary of my father's death, I established the Edward Harrington Truth and Reconciliation Fellowship at the newly formed Ethics Institute. The fellowship would fund research into corporate governance, specifically focusing on protecting companies from internal corruption and fraud. The inaugural recipient was a brilliant young academic whose father had lost his life savings in a corporate scandal similar to what had nearly destroyed Harrington Enterprises. When she accepted the fellowship at a small ceremony, she spoke words that resonated deeply with me. "Justice is not always found in courtrooms or prison sentences," she said. "Sometimes the most powerful form of justice is creating systems that prevent others from suffering the same fate. Sometimes, the truest revenge is building something so magnificent that it renders the original betrayal insignificant by comparison." I could not have expressed it better myself. As I approach 60, I find myself reflecting more often on the journey that brought me here. The betrayal that once defined me has become merely a chapter in a much longer story. An important chapter, certainly, but not the climax or conclusion. The company continues to thrive under my leadership, though I have begun grooming potential successors. Not just one individual, who could be vulnerable to the same manipulation I faced, but a team of talented executives committed to our core values. Thomas and I were married in a small ceremony overlooking Milford Bay, where the Harrington story began 3 generations ago. My father's painting of the bay hung in our home, its secret compartment still containing the evidence I had never needed to use, but would always preserve as a reminder. My mother and brother are buried in the family plot alongside my father, a visual representation of the complicated ties that bind us even in death. I visit occasionally, leaving flowers for my father, and acknowledging the others with quiet reflection on how different things might have been had ambition and prejudice not poisoned their hearts. Sometimes people ask if I have forgiven them. The question always gives me pause. Forgiveness, I have learned, is not a single act but a process. There are days when I can look back with detachment, understanding the insecurities and flawed thinking that drove their actions. There are other days when the pain of betrayal feels as fresh as it did 20 years ago. What I have achieved is not so much forgiveness as transcendence, building a life and legacy so meaningful that it overshadows the darkness of the past. The greatest revenge against those who tried to diminish me has been to flourish beyond anyone's expectations, including my own. And so the true legacy of the Harrington name continues, not in bitterness or vendetta, but in strength, integrity, and resilience. My grandfather built an empire with ships. My father expanded it with vision. I nearly lost it to betrayal, but reclaimed and transformed it through determination and strategic justice. Karma, as they say, always finds its way. And sometimes, if you are patient and principled, you get to be its instrument. When people hear the name Harrington now, they think of corporate ethics, sustainable success, and visionary leadership. Few remember the scandal that nearly destroyed us a quarter-century ago. Even fewer know the full truth behind my fall and rise, the calculated betrayal, and the equally calculated revenge that followed. That is perhaps my greatest achievement, transforming a story of family treachery into a legacy of triumph, turning personal pain into institutional strength. The company that bears my family name will outlast us all, carrying forward values that my grandfather would recognize and approve of, even as it evolves to meet the challenges of a changing world. As for me, the girl who was never supposed to lead, the woman who lost everything and fought her way back, I have found a peace I once thought impossible. Not the passive peace of resignation, but the earned peace of someone who has faced her demons, both external and internal, and emerged stronger for the confrontation. In the end, karma gave me exactly what I deserved, not just the restoration of what was taken, but the opportunity to create something far greater in its place. And that perhaps is the most satisfying revenge of all.